Steve Palazzolo, our good buddy, Pro Football Focus senior analyst and host of Pro Football Focus NFL podcast. And we've got our power rankings coming up for this upcoming season. After the draft, PFF has their power rankings. Okay, where do we get a surprise here with the best teams in football, Steve?
I think it's got to be the Browns at 9. So when we're running the numbers on this, there's a lot of data that says Deshaun Watson is a good quarterback, and he only played the 5 games last year. He wasn't great, but I think the Browns have a pretty strong all-around roster. They've done a good job just building depth over the last couple of years, and then it's going to come down to Deshaun Watson. So our numbers still say, hey, there's far more good than bad on his tape, even though the good was way back in 2020. So the Browns being at 9 in our power rankings, probably the biggest surprise, I think.
Give me the team or teams that improved the most and affected their rankings in the offseason.
It might be obvious, but the Jets, they're up at 6 for us. And again, it's so quarterback driven. We have a spot on our site that says it puts our power rankings together, and then it shows, okay, the quarterback is worth X number of points, basically. So a Patrick Mahomes might be 7 or 8 points on, say, the spread, which of course is going to affect your ranking by about 15 spots basically for the season. So Aaron Rodgers, going from a Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Mike White team to Aaron Rodgers, who again may have regressed a little bit last year, but there's far more good data for Aaron Rodgers. He's the biggest impact player to move this offseason, so it moves the Jets way up, and they already had a pretty solid roster around him anyway.
What was the grade on Rodgers by Pro Football Focus last year?
I believe he finished in the high 70s, which was good, not great. He's a guy that coming off his 2 MVP seasons, he was in the high 80s, low 90s. So it's from that elite area to just good. Obviously, I think with Rodgers, there were other circumstances dealing with the rookie receivers, a late breakout from Christian Watson, losing Devontae Adams. So all of that stuff has to be factored in, I think, as far as context. But Rodgers was good, not great last year. But I think if he was to bounce back, it wouldn't really surprise me, given his history.
Let's take Rodgers out of the equation. Let's look at the talent with Green Bay and the Jets. Which roster is more talented?
I think the Jets have the nod right now. It's pretty close. Green Bay had an influx. They had 14 draft picks. I think a lot depends on how well those guys get integrated right away. But if you look at the Jets, their defense got a huge boost last year. Sauce Gardner, the number 4 overall pick, who was the best corner in the league by our numbers. DJ Reed at corner, who they brought in free agency last year. So that solidified a secondary that was terrible for years. They're loaded on the defensive line, the Jets. They're rolling 7 or 8 deep with guys that can rush the passer. It's going to come down to offensive line health, I think, for the Jets. They had a lot of injuries last year, and that hurt them, but they've got playmakers. They've got players on both sides. I think the Jets do have a slightly better roster than the Packers right now.
The least talented roster or rosters can be found where?
I think it's Arizona. So the Cardinals, and which is why I loved their draft, giving up draft picks or giving up draft position to look at next year. Arizona is completely depleted on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe offensively. You have Kyler Murray already. He's hurt. He's going to miss time. Maybe DeAndre Hopkins isn't there any longer. So I think it's Arizona. And then fascinating, it's the Rams, really. I mean, the Rams they have high-end talent. They have Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald. But the Rams' depth is absolutely challenged. So those couple of years that they, quote-unquote, went for it, starting to see what happens there where they're depleted. They need a lot of young players to step up.
It feels like there's a groundswell, and maybe that's overstating this, that Arizona is going to be bad, and next year they'll be on the clock with the number 1 pick and maybe the 2nd overall pick. Therefore, how could you pass up Caleb Williams? Could you see Arizona moving on from Kyler Murray after this season?
I could see it. I mean, Kyler, it's a little more difficult now that they signed him. It's harder to move off that contract and everything. But Caleb Williams, I think a year from now, you're going to get Patrick Mahomes comps. You're just going to. I know it's unfair. I know we should never use Mahomes or Brady or any of the immediate Hall of Famers as comparisons. But Caleb Williams has Patrick Mahomes type of plays. He's a great runner. He has unbelievable arm talent, and he's just productive, and he's really, really good. So a year from now, we're going to be talking about this great prospect at a Trevor Lawrence level. And Kyler Murray, who's coming off of an injury, we might see him for only half a season. Yeah, that's going to be a debate a year from now. And I could see Arizona trying to find a way to just bring Caleb Williams in.
Do you remember what Pro Football Focus thought about Patrick Mahomes coming out of college?
Yeah, so like our overall grading wasn't great. If you look at his entire career and you look at the data, nothing said this guy's, future superstar. Now, his last season, He did play at an elite level. So I was trying to figure out, how do you weigh that with Mahomes? He had quit baseball, which I thought was a factor. And then when those were what the hard numbers said. And then what we said from an analysis standpoint isn't different from what a lot of other people said. It was like, hey, the special is there. He needs to learn how to play within structure a little bit better. And the upside is immense. And then he goes to this incredible situation with Andy Reid, with the Chiefs. And if you read everybody's Mahomes scouting reports, weaknesses, working within the pocket, decision-making, working within structure. It was like he took every weakness and turned it into a strength his first year as a starter. So I think a lot of us had the same analysis on Mahomes, and then he goes to a situation where it was just perfect for his development.
Did Pro Football Focus have Mitchell Trubisky rated higher than Mahomes?
Come on, Dan. Why do you have to go there? Why do you have to go there? Yes, we may have. We may have had Trubisky, Watson, and Mahomes. It was a mistake. It was obviously a mistake, like other people.
What did I miss, though, or maybe I didn't miss with Mitchell Trubisky? Because I would watch him in college, but I never came away going, man, you got to go up and get that guy. Whereas Deshaun Watson did everything you want a quarterback to do. Beat Alabama, win a national title. It's almost like we saw too much of him. And we love man, you got to see this guy. Well, I don't know if Anthony Richardson is, like Mitchell Trubisky. You got to see this guy. So what was it that Trubisky did or didn't do that everybody fell in love with?
I mean, looking back, I think there were a lot of concerns about Trubisky, but there was a lot of positives. I think one of the things that in his camp was the fact that he was a one-year starter. So it depends on how you look at that. As a one-year starter, you think there's more upside. There's more there. As a one-year starter, you could also say, why didn't he see the field earlier at UNC? People use that for and against him.
Well, it's the same thing with Will Levis that makes me nervous. Same thing that, we got a few. There's Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. I got to have more of a sample size than 1 year.
Well, it's interesting because, Joe Burrow had more than 1 year as a starter, but only 1 year elite. And Kyler Murray was a one-year wonder as well, basically, as a guy that was sitting behind Baker Mayfield, sitting at Texas A&M for a little bit. So it kind of goes both ways. So I think, with Trubisky, the thing with Watson, too, if you just really dissected his game, it was a lot of like one read and then he takes off type of stuff. Like, he changed his playing style in the NFL. And then again, with Mahomes, it just felt like such backyard football in the Big 12, where you're seeing a three-man rush half the time. It was like, well, this isn't translatable. This will never work. But you just don't see how special they are as far as wanting to get better in that natural playmaking. And I think that's where a lot of us missed back in that 2017 class.
And Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus senior analyst. You guys all in on Daniel Jones?
No, I mean, I think he's in the middle tier of quarterbacks. I mean, so I think we're in a world where there's a lot of starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and Daniel Jones is one of them. Rewind 10 years, I think it was tough to find a Daniel Jones level starter. Andy Dalton was like this cutoff where if you were below Andy Dalton, teams were trading for, whoever. So I think Daniel Jones is fine. I think he's okay.
Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones, are they on the same level?
No, I think Dak Prescott's a tier higher than Daniel Jones. I think the one thing that Jones has going for him, I don't think he's as good of a passer as Dak Prescott. I think it's the running ability that Jones has and the fact that the Giants tapped into that. When he rushes for 700 yards, kind of quietly, but he picks up 5, 6, 7 first downs per game, that stuff goes under the radar, and Daniel Jones does that extremely well. So it's not as flashy, but it's effective. That's the one thing I think Jones has. But I don't think I think Dak has far more of an opportunity of carrying a passing game than Daniel Jones does at this point in their careers.
You're anti-running back in the first round, but 2 went in the top 15 picks. Mistakes by Detroit and Atlanta?
Yeah, I think they're mistakes, but it's also tough to identify them. Like Bijan Robinson's going to go and he's probably going to rush for 1,500 yards. He's going to have 12 touchdowns and it's going to look like a win. Saquon Barkley went number 2 and he won Offensive Rookie of the Year. And everybody's like, look, pick justified. But it comes down to the wins and losses, right? The Falcons already had a top 3 or 4 rushing attack last year with 5th-round rookie Tyler Algier. Yeah, they have the best running back room in the NFL. Does that actually matter in today's NFL? I don't know. But I don't know if we're going to feel it because the Falcons got so much better across the rest of their roster. It's not like they're going to win 4 games and we're going to say, see, you shouldn't have taken Bijan Robinson. It's more about the opportunity cost of other positions. So, I think they're mistakes over time as far as winning games. But I get how you could fall in love with the players. Nothing against Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. The Lions won, same thing. I don't know if you're going to feel it. I think their roster's so much better. They had 5 picks in the top 60 or so. So, they're going to be better this year. But I think over time, you'll feel it a little bit more because of the opportunity cost of other positions that they could have brought in.
I would love to see Bijan Robinson used the way Deebo Samuel is. I'd love to have him get 800 yards and 90 catches. I'd like to have that advantage there where I'm not, going to give him the ball and just pound him, but I would be able to have those strategic matchups, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, that kind of situation. And I had a scout tell me, he's got unbelievable hands, and I wouldn't use him as a primary back. I would just have him as a weapon. His position is a weapon and use him accordingly.
He is that good. I mean, you see there's plays on film where he's running the seam and adjusting to off-target passes as a receiver. The one caveat to that, though, when Deebo Samuel, who is really a wide receiver, the defense calls him a wide receiver. When he lines up into the backfield, that breaks defenses. You have to bring a corner into the box. You have to just change your run gap fit, your run fits and all that stuff. Running backs don't have that type of mismatch ability as much as, say, a Deebo, who's a receiver by name, treated as a receiver, and then plays running back. So it's similar, but there are some differences where I think Deebo has the advantage.
Don't be a know-it-all, Steve, okay?
I'm sorry. It was a good idea, Dan. It's a good idea.
Once again, Mitchell Trubisky. You guys love Mitchell Trubisky, all right?
We've all grown and learned in the last 6 or 7 years, right?
Hey, good to talk to you as always. Thank you. We always appreciate Pro Football Focus. That says Steve Palazzolo, the senior analyst there, co-host of Pro Football Focus NFL podcast.